David paused, eyeing the neat handwriting and the scattered post-it notes. He never snooped. Trust was supposed to be the bedrock of their marriage. Still, the planner lay invitingly exposed, as if daring him to look. After a brief hesitation, he flipped through the pages. Unfamiliar names and times caught his eye. Appointments to places he'd never heard of, and personal training sessions that didn't match the schedule she claimed. He closed the planner, his heart thudding with unease. The stainless steel refrigerator was spotless, every surface in the kitchen gleaming, just the way Claire liked it. Through the window, he could see the manicured gardens, her pride, bathed in soft morning light. Ryan came bounding down the stairs, backpack slung over his shoulder. "Morning, Dad. Are you driving me today?" he asked. "Yeah, let's get going." David did his best to sound cheerful, ruffling Ryan's sandy hair. He forced a smile, concealing the turmoil simmering beneath his calm exterior. The drive to school was filled with easy conversation about baseball tryouts and geometry quizzes. Ryan was excited and full of energy, reminding David of why he worked so hard. For his family, for this life. After dropping Ryan off, David sat for a moment, staring out over the bustling traffic. His phone buzzed again, this time with a message from Claire. "Meeting ran late, don't wait up for lunch." Another vague excuse. He sighed, started the engine, and pulled out into St. Louis traffic, telling himself it was nothing. But deep down, David knew the perfect facade was beginning to crack. Something was changing, and he couldn't ignore it much longer. The familiar clang of machinery and shouts of workers filtered up from below, grounding David in the world he had built, brick by brick, sweat by sweat. He stared out at the fleet of trucks bearing his name, and felt a storm of betrayal swirling inside him. Nothing about this made sense. How could Claire do this? How could she risk everything they'd worked for, not just her marriage, but the stability of their family's future? Frank waited in silence, giving David space to process. After an eternal moment, David turned back, his face stone. "Frank, I need proof. Ironclad. I want you to keep digging. Find out every permit, every deal Baldwin's pushed through, and I want blow-by-blow details of whatever Claire and Baldwin think they're hiding. No mistakes." Frank nodded, determined. "You'll have it, David. I'll keep this quiet, just like you want." David forced himself to thank Frank, though every word tasted sour. With the evidence spread before him, the reality was undeniable. Claire hadn't just betrayed him as a husband, she'd betrayed every foundation he'd built, from their home to the company that bore his name. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the treetops casting long shadows over his land, David sat alone in his workshop. Memories of his wedding day flashed through his mind. Claire's radiant smile, Ryan as a toddler running between their legs, laughter echoing through rooms he'd crafted by hand. It all felt distant now, tainted. His phone chimed with a message from Ryan. "Made the baseball team. Can we build a trophy shelf?" David wiped his face, steeling himself. All that mattered now was his son, and making sure the truth, no matter how painful, came to light. David held her tightly, feeling her shake with uncontrollable sobs. For the first time in weeks, the distance and betrayal between them faded, replaced by the raw, overwhelming fear of possibly losing their son. The hospital waiting room was cold and sterile, filled with the quiet hum of fluorescent lights and the low murmurs of other anxious families. Nothing else mattered now except Ryan. Hours slipped by in a blur of doctors' updates and paperwork. Friends and family filtered in and out, offering comfort that felt both genuine and remote. David paced the hall, haunted by helplessness, replaying every moment he could have done differently, Had he been too hard on Ryan about his grades? Did he tell him enough how proud he was? Claire sat curled in a corner chair, eyes swollen and red, hands twisted together in silent prayer. Finally, a young doctor in blue scrubs came to speak with them. "He's stable, but the next 48 hours are critical. We'll do everything possible. I'm so sorry this happened to your family." "Thank you, doctor," David said, his voice hoarse. That night, David and Claire sat at Ryan's bedside, each lost in their own thoughts. The boy's face was pale, a small bandage covering his forehead. Machines beeped steadily, each sound a lifeline. David reached out, brushing a lock of blonde hair from Ryan's temple. "Hang in there, buddy. We need you. You're strong." Claire squeezed his arm, her voice barely a whisper. "We'll get through this, David. We have to." As darkness settled over St. Louis, the once divided couple found themselves united in hope and desperation, praying for a miracle that would bring their son back to them. David shook his head slowly, disbelief and dread warring on his face. "No," he replied quietly, his voice barely audible. "Ryan is our son. There's no adoption, no hospital mix-up." Dr. Foster regarded him with gentle concern. "Sometimes such discrepancies can be the result of rare genetic mutations, but it's extremely uncommon. I thought you should be aware, just in case you have additional information that might help us treat him." David thanked her mechanically, his mind barely registering her words. When the doctor left, he just sat there, staring at the blank wall. The numbers and probabilities bounced through his head against the steady beep of Ryan's heart monitor. It was impossible, not just unlikely, but impossible, that he was Ryan's biological father. Margaret, seeing the look on his face, asked, "What is it, David? Has something happened?" He shook his head, heart pounding, trying to find his voice. "Nothing, just thinking." He didn't trust himself to say anything else. Later, when Claire returned, face drawn and eyes rimmed with exhaustion, David looked at her for a long moment. He wanted to ask her outright, demand the truth, but the sight of their son, so small and vulnerable against the white hospital sheets, kept him silent. He sat back down, reaching for Ryan's hand. "Hang in there, buddy," he whispered. "No matter what, I'm here." His world felt suddenly fragile, on the verge of shattering at a single word, yet still anchored by hope for his son's recovery. David circled the car slowly, examining every inch. He crouched down and found what he was afraid of. Fresh scrapes and a dent on the front bumper. Flecks of blue paint embedded in the metal. His stomach dropped. This wasn't some wild hunch from a traumatized boy. The evidence was here, indisputable. A wave of emotions washed over him. Anger, betrayal, a staggering sense of disbelief. Margaret, Claire's own mother, had hurt his son and then lied to his face, even as she sat by Ryan's bedside, feigning concern. The truth was uglier than he'd imagined. He took a deep breath, pulling out his phone, snapping discrete photos of the damage and the license plate. David tucked his phone back in his pocket, his hand shaking. He returned to the hospital in time to see Margaret heading back with the shopping bag in hand. "Is everything all right, David?" she asked, her eyes searching his face for any sign that her secret had been discovered. He forced a calm smile. "Just needed some air. Too much waiting around makes a man restless." Margaret nodded, satisfied for now, and swept past him toward Ryan's room. David stood in the hallway, heart racing, piecing the puzzle together. In one terrible week, everything he believed in, his marriage, his family, his very identity as a father, had been shattered. But Ryan was awake, his spirit unbroken, and David felt a burning resolve to shield his son from any more pain. He returned quietly to his son's bedside, determined to uncover the full truth and protect Ryan, no matter what secrets came to light. David's heart pounded in his chest, each beat echoing the betrayal that had become his life. "And you thought hitting our son would solve that problem?" he growled, his voice low and dangerous. Margaret's eyes flashed with a mix of fear and defiance. "I never meant to hurt Ryan. I was just trying to protect Claire. She deserves better than you, David. You're rough, uncultured. She was meant for someone like Trevor." David's hands clenched into fists, but he kept his voice steady. "And what about Ryan? What did he deserve? To be run down in the street and left for dead?" Margaret's face crumpled, but David wasn't moved. "You're a monster, Margaret. You hit our son and then lied to our faces, sitting by his bedside like you cared. You're no better than Claire and Trevor." Margaret's voice trembled. "I was wrong, David. I see that now. I just wanted Claire to be happy. I didn't think—" "You didn't think," David interrupted, his voice cold. "You never think about anyone but yourself. Well, it ends now. You're going to tell the police the truth, and then you're going to leave and never come back." Margaret nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I'll do whatever you want, David. Just please, don't tell Claire. She'll never forgive me." David's expression hardened. "That's not my problem. You made your bed, Margaret. Now you'll have to lie in it. And so will Claire. This ends tonight." David leaned forward, his voice low and dangerous. "I have proof, Baldwin. Photographs, surveillance, the works. I know about the affair, and I know about the bribes. I know you've been using Claire to get ahead, and I know you've been using her to destroy my business. But it ends now." Baldwin's face piled, but he tried to bluff. "You can't prove any of this. It's your word against mine." David smiled coldly. "It's not just my word. I have a witness, someone who's been watching you for a long time, someone who's willing to testify against you. And if that's not enough, I have something else." Baldwin's eyes narrowed. "What do you want, Mitchell?" David's expression hardened. "I want you to leave Claire alone. I want you to stay away from my family, and I want you to stop interfering with my business. If you do that, I'll keep the evidence to myself. But if you don't, I'll make sure every detail comes out. You'll lose your job, your reputation, and probably your freedom. And Claire, she'll know exactly who you are." Baldwin's face twisted with anger, but he knew he was cornered. "Fine, Mitchell. You win. I'll stay away from Claire. But this isn't over." David stood up, his voice steady. "It is over, Baldwin, for both of you. And if you ever come near my family again, you'll regret it. Now, I suggest you start packing. Your political career is over." With that, David turned and left, leaving Baldwin to stew in his own deceit. As he walked out of City Hall, David felt a grim satisfaction. The first phase of his plan was complete. Now, it was time for the next step. David raised an eyebrow, watching Claire's carefully measured words. He could see the tension flicker behind her polished exterior. "She's always been meticulous about her affairs," he said, his tone even. "Did she mention anything else? Anything unusual?" Claire's eyes darted away for a moment. Then she returned his gaze with a forced smile. "Just the usual. Worried about the future, about Ryan. She wants everything to go smoothly, especially now." David nodded slowly, folding his hands in his lap. "Speaking of Ryan, you should know he's doing better. The doctors think he'll make a full recovery." He looked at their son, his heart twisting with a mix of love and pain. "He's a fighter, isn't he?" Claire reached out to smooth Ryan's hair. "He's the best." Her voice caught, a rare crack in her composure. They sat in silence for a minute, the beeping of medical equipment the only sound. David watched her closely, his own mask of calm never slipping. He knew the coming days would push their family to the breaking point, but he was determined to steer the outcome, for Ryan, for himself, and for the company he'd built with his own hands. Quietly, he said, "Claire, we need to talk soon, about everything. I don't want any secrets between us. Not anymore." Claire blinked, startled by the gravity in his tone. "Of course," she replied, but her eyes betrayed her unease. David offered a small, reassuring smile, but inside he was already moving his pieces into place, determined to expose every secret and finally take control of his fractured world. Margaret wrung her hands, anxiety plain on her face. "And when Claire agrees to set up this meeting?" David's expression hardened, but he kept his tone calm and persuasive. "Then you listen. Let Baldwin do most of the talking. Ask him about his intentions, his plans for Claire, and for Ryan. Get him comfortable and let him slip up. Every word will be recorded." Margaret stared at him, her lips trembling. "This is dangerous, David. What if they find out?" He placed a reassuring hand on her arm. "Margaret, they won't. You'll say you're worried about Claire's happiness, about Ryan's stability. You're just being a good mother and grandmother. As long as you follow the plan, no one will suspect a thing." She nodded reluctantly, eyes haunted by all that had transpired. "Fine, I'll call Claire tonight." "That's all I need," David said. "After this, you're done. You can go back to Virginia and leave this tangled mess behind." Margaret pulled herself together, straightening her shoulders with the last reserves of dignity she had. "I'll do what you ask. But David, promise me you'll take care of Ryan." David looked her in the eye, and for the first time that evening his voice softened. "No matter what happens, Margaret, Ryan will always be my son. He'll be protected, I promise." Margaret nodded and quietly left the cafe, her role in the final chapter about to begin. David watched her go, mind racing with the details still to unfold, certain that the web of lies was about to collapse. For Claire, for Baldwin, and perhaps, at last, for himself. He watched from the shadows as they entered, Trevor looking nervous and disheveled, Claire tense and on edge, and Margaret, the picture of calm control. David nursed his drink, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. As they were seated, David casually made his way to their table, stopping by to greet them. "Margaret, Claire, Trevor, what a pleasant surprise. Mind if I join you for a moment?" Margaret's eyes flickered with surprise, but she quickly recovered. "Of course, David, we'd love to have you." David pulled up a chair, his eyes on Trevor. "Trevor, I've heard a lot about you. You're doing great work at the Planning Commission." Trevor forced a smile, his hands trembling slightly. "Thank you, David. I'm just trying to do my part for the city." David nodded, leaning in closer. "I'm sure you are. But I've also heard some troubling things. About your gambling debts, for instance, and the bribes you've been taking to cover them. It's a dangerous game you're playing, Trevor." Trevor's face paled, and Claire's eyes widened in shock. "David, what are you talking about?" she stammered. David's gaze shifted to Claire, his voice cold. "I'm talking about the fact that your lover is a crook, Claire, and that he's been using you to get ahead in his career. But it's over now. I have all the evidence I need to destroy him, and you, if necessary." Margaret sat in stunned silence, her face a mask of horror. Trevor's eyes darted around the room, looking for an escape, but David's words had him trapped. "You can't prove anything," Trevor blurted out, his voice shaking. David smiled, a cold, triumphant smile. "Oh, I can, and I will, unless you both do exactly as I say. Now, let's order some wine. We have a lot to discuss." Baldwin's words tumbled out, each one tinged with desperation. "If you help me clear my debts and get these guys off my back, I'll leave Claire alone for good. I'll resign from the planning commission, disappear from St. Louis. You'll never see me again. And Claire won't have anything tying her to me. I'd be doing both of us a favor." David eyed him coldly. "That's quite a promise. What kind of guarantee do I have that you'll actually leave?" "I'll sign whatever you want," Baldwin pleaded, eyes wild. "Just help me get out before it's too late. Nobody needs to know about any of this. Claire, the permits, the affair, it all goes away." David paused, pretending to weigh the offer, letting Baldwin sweat in the silence. He finally spoke, cool and unyielding. "I want a written confession from you, Trevor. Everything. The bribes, the insider information, your affair with Claire. All of it. You deliver that to me, and I'll consider your request. Otherwise, I send everything I've got to the Ethics Commission, your ex-wife's attorneys, and the media. You'll be lucky if you're not in jail by the end of the month." Baldwin's shoulders sagged, defeat settling around him like a heavy coat. "Fine," he whispered. "I'll write it up. Just promise me you'll help." "You have 72 hours, David said firmly. "After that, you're on your own." Trevor nodded miserably, knowing he was out of options. As David turned to leave, he felt a grim sense of satisfaction. Every piece of the puzzle was clicking into place. Soon, he'd have the confession he needed to finally free himself, and Ryan, from the lies and betrayals that had nearly destroyed them both. David's voice was steady, but his eyes held a cold determination. But she didn't stay safe, did she? She found someone who promised her excitement, adventure, and now she's paying the price. Margaret's hands trembled slightly as she set down her gardening tools. "What do you need from me, David?" David pulled out a small recording device, placing it on the table between them. "I need you to record your conversations with Claire. Everything she says about Trevor, about the affair, about her plans. I need proof, Margaret. I need to know exactly what she's been doing." Margaret's eyes widened in shock. "You want me to spy on my own daughter?" David's expression didn't waver. "I want you to help me protect Ryan. I want to make sure that Claire and Trevor can't hurt him or anyone else ever again. You owe me that much, Margaret. You owe Ryan that much." Margaret's face crumpled, but she nodded, taking the device. "I'll do it for Ryan." David placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Thank you, Margaret. This is the right thing to do, and when it's over, you can go back to your life, knowing you did everything you could to protect your family." As David left Margaret's house, he felt a grim satisfaction. The trap was set, and the pieces were falling into place. Soon, the truth would come to light, and David would finally have the justice he sought. She opened her mouth, then closed it, shaking her head as tears welled up in her eyes. "It's just, everything's happening at once. I feel like I'm losing control of my whole life." David wrapped his arms around her, steady and gentle. "We'll get through it, Claire. We always do," he said softly, comfortingly, even as he knew the facade was almost over. Claire clung to him, silent for a moment, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. "I just wanted to do what was right, for Ryan, for all of us, but maybe I'm just not cut out for this kind of life." David held her until she calmed, stroking her hair. "Everyone feels lost sometimes, but you're stronger than you think, Claire." She nodded, wiping her tears, and murmured, "Thanks, David." She straightened, quickly fixing her makeup in the mirror and forcing a smile. "Let's go see Ryan." They rode to the hospital in heavy silence, Crail trying to hold herself together while David waited for the last domino to fall. He knew that with her desperation mounting, it would only be a matter of hours before Claire reached out to Trevor, seeking some way to salvage the future she thought she wanted. Everything was now in motion. The perfect storm of guilt, betrayal, and manufactured despair. David was ready. Soon, everyone would know the truth, and Claire would have no place left to hide. He's at the police station, and the detectives have questions for you about the permit fraud. David's voice was icy calm, but his eyes burned with everything he'd kept hidden for months. Claire's face crumpled. The weight of her secrets, her plans, and her losses finally pressed her to the edge. "David, please," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm begging you, for Ryan, don't do this." David shook his head, unmoved. "You did this, Claire, not me, not Trevor. You chose every step." He straightened his shoulders. "Now you'll have to face the consequences." Claire took a shaky breath, realizing she was completely out of moves. With nothing left to say, she turned away and walked back toward Ryan's room, shoulders trembling. David watched her go, his resolve hard but his heart battered by grief. He glanced through the window at his son, who looked small and lost amid the chaos. For him, David reminded himself. For Ryan's sake, the truth had to come out. He turned and headed for the police station, ready to see justice done, and finally close the painful chapter that had unraveled his life. David never spoke of Baldwin again. He ensured the paperwork and digital trails showed Baldwin had left St. Louis for a new life, but only David and Frank Morrison knew the truth. The unfinished warehouse stood as a silent testament to the cost of betrayal, a secret that would never be unearthed, both literally and figuratively. Margaret returned to Virginia, distancing herself from the chaos. She rarely spoke to Claire, and when she did, their conversations were brittle and brief. Ryan, now a little quieter and older in his eyes, stayed with David in the grand colonial house. Together, father and son focused on rebuilding their routines, finding solace in carpentry projects and late-night talks. David signed Ryan up for baseball, helped him with homework, coached him on the values of hard work and honesty. Every so often, a pang of regret pulsed through David, but it was tempered by a hard-earned sense of peace. The truth, costly as it had been, had set him free. And Ryan, too. The company thrived, his employees returned to their livelihoods, and Mitchell Construction became stronger for having weathered the storm. On evenings when the golden sun crept over the St. Louis horizon, David and Ryan would stand side by side on the porch, silent but together. There were still wounds, there always would be, but there was also hope. And for David Mitchell that was enough to move forward, one honest day at a time. David met Ryan's gaze steadily, his voice calm but resolute. "I did what I had to do. Not everyone will understand that, but you're my son. My responsibility is to keep you safe and ensure you have a future built on something real. Honor, loyalty, and hard work. That's what matters most." Ryan took in his father's words, gripping the wrench a little tighter, his eyes reflecting a new awareness and respect. "I get it, Dad. I won't let anyone hurt us either." A proud smile warmed David's face as he clapped Ryan on the shoulder. "That's my boy." The two returned to their work, the rhythmic sound of tools echoing around the garage, a testament to the new foundation they were building together. Outside, dusk settled over the land David had fought to protect. Within the walls of their home, scars remained, but they were healed by trust, rebuilt with shared purpose and steadfast love. And for the first time in a long while, David Mitchell looked toward the future, not with fear or anger, but with hope. The lessons of betrayal had forged an unbreakable bond between father and son, and that would be their legacy, stronger than blood, enduring beyond any storm. Again, soon. But inside the warmly lit garage, David and Ryan worked side by side, their laughter blending with the hum of power tools and the gentle clink of hardware. Snow drifted past the windows, settling quietly over a world that, for the Mitchells, felt safer now, fortified by hard truths and silent promises. David watched his son, pride swelling in his chest. Whatever the world brought next, they were ready. Together, they would build something lasting, unshakable and true, tested by fire, bound by loyalty. And as the wind howled softly against the glass, the Mitchells stood strong, a family forged and renewed against the storms outside.